Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Good morning, and you're very welcome to our first Signpost webinar of 2024. We hope you had a lovely Christmas, and on behalf of the whole Signpost team, I want to wish you all happy and healthy 2024. We're looking forward to another year of delving into innovative practices, cutting-edge technologies, and holistic approaches that foster sustainable farming across the island of Ireland and beyond. As we know, we have plenty of international viewers joining us each and every Friday morning. And what better way to start the year than to look at water quality. So today we'll be discussing how farmers are being supported to prioritise on-farm actions for water quality. And we're delighted to be joined by Aoife Feeney, who is a Nuffield Scholar and also Policy Officer for Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality with the Netherlands Embassy in Ireland. Aoife, you're very welcome to this morning's webinar.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be back. It's a few years since I presented on one of these in a previous life, so it's great to be back, and thanks for having me this morning. Happy New Year to everyone as well.
Great, thank you. And Pat, good morning to you. Happy New Year to you.
Good morning.
You're
good to be back again.
Back in action, yes.
Back in action. 2-week break seems wrong on a Friday morning. Not to be
So who would believe? Yes, 2020. We're almost 3 years later. We're still meeting on a Friday morning. So it's great that we have such a steady flow of
almost 4, Mark.
Almost 4. Yes, yeah. Well, it's hard to believe. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Where's my head going? 2024. I'm still locked in 2023 mode for some reason. It'll take another week. So, Aoife, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself. The last time you were talking to us, you were talking about environmental sustainability in agriculture as well. But you've changed your role since then.
I have, yeah. So I suppose the topic hasn't changed drastically, maybe just evolved a little bit over the last few years, but my own position has changed. So I left the beauty of West Cork, surprisingly, to move back to Dublin almost 2 years ago now, to take up a position with the Netherlands Embassy. And I suppose this position was a new one in Ireland, and it came, I suppose, off the back of Brexit as well. Where the Netherlands government, I suppose, saw that they needed a partner when it comes to EU policy, and it just seemed like a natural fit that Ireland would be that. So, yeah, it's been a very interesting 2 years. A lot of figuring things out when it's a new position that you're kind of figuring it out as you go along. You're learning a lot, and I suppose the biggest thing for me was that it wasn't just dairy focused. I'm now working across all sectors, across agriculture, horticulture, fisheries, food. It all kind of lands on my desk. So no 2 days are the same, which is brilliant. But it can also be a little bit daunting at times as well, of course. And doing all that while completing my Nuffield scholarship as well. So it's been a crazy couple of years, but really, really good. And I've learned a lot. So it's been great.
Thanks, Aoife. And I mean, for those viewers this morning that aren't familiar with the Nuffield Scholarship, can you tell us just a little bit about it that would give people some insight? And if they're interested, I know there's very good social media presence and digital presence there, but maybe just to highlight what it's about.
Yes, so I suppose Nuffield is a global programme. I'm obviously part of the Nuffield Ireland crew, and I suppose it's a thought leadership and development programme. So it's kind of experience-based learning, and scholars travel around the world to study their specific topic in order to bring learnings home from global practices back to their home countries. And it ranges from all kinds of topics. Like even if you just look at the Irish website, Nuffield Ireland, and see all the various topics that our own scholars have, and then compare that to those around the world, it's vastly different. You've got scholars from the likes of Canada, the US, Chile, Brazil, we've Australia, New Zealand, Poland and Germany actually joined Nuffield last year as well, which is fantastic to see it expanding in Europe. And I'm definitely forgetting a lot more within that as well, but it's a huge global reach. And it's really about that experience-based learning, and I suppose pushing your boundaries and your comfort zones. And I have a couple of slides on it as well that I'll
Great.
touch on it, so I can share my screen in a couple of minutes and delve into that a little bit more as well. But I suppose for anyone thinking about it, for me, my topic was around water quality. And the reason I applied was, I suppose, I saw that, having worked in the area for so long, that there was probably opportunities for us to learn more from other countries, and other farmers as well, more importantly, and try and bring that back here. And now the task is to try and spread those learnings a small bit and try and create those partnerships across the different nations that I think will benefit Irish water quality as well. But ultimately, I think, we have to remember what we're doing is fantastic back here in Ireland as well. And we do have to remind ourselves, give ourselves a pat on the back, and not forget to keep moving forward is the big thing as well.
Right. Well, look, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We can be very critical of ourselves at times, but there is a lot of good work being done out there, and so it is great. Look, Ireland, we're a small island, so it's great to have people like yourself going across the globe to see what's happening there. So I think we'll maybe get straight into business, and if you could share your slide with us. And really looking forward to your presentation, because it does bring that international dimension to water quality. So Aoife, I'll hand over to you and we'll take some questions afterwards.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Pat. So yeah, look, Nuffield, as I said, it's a global farmer network essentially, and I suppose it originated from the UK, from Lord Nuffield, who I suppose he developed the Morris Minor and that group, and he had travelled to the US to learn from other car manufacturers, so he could develop his own business in that regard. And then he kind of thought, well, this could be applied in agriculture, and so the Nuffield Scholarship was born. Now that's a very brief overview of the history of it, but I think it's just super interesting to see that someone like that had seen the opportunity that speaking to other farmers and traveling around the world can give to others, and that it's not all about academic learning, and I think it's a fantastic program in that regard. And some of the key focus areas are around personal capacity building, developing excellence in agricultural sustainability, production, distribution and management. And I suppose historically it was very much focused on production and how farmers could grow their businesses. But over the last number of years, we've seen a huge difference and focus on sustainability and environmental management, which is crucial, as we know, back in the EU and especially back here in Ireland. And it's through local, national and global thought leadership and travel and experience-based learning around the globe that this kind of happens as well. So the Nuffield Ireland's mission is to discover people with a desire to contribute to the greater good of agriculture, to food systems and society, and to develop their leadership capacity and support a journey to better thinking and action. And I suppose this is done through the support of the industry and the government, and I suppose it's fantastic, and I'll discuss and thank our sponsors at the end as well. But we really wouldn't be here without the sponsors of Nuffield Ireland, and we've got a pool of over 100 scholars now. And I think if you go back to some of our first scholars and look at some of our newest scholars, the topics are still super relevant, and it's great to have leaders in those areas across the country as well. And the values of Nuffield are humility, respect, integrity, reciprocity, which is always difficult to say, diversity, thought leadership and continuous learning mindset. And I suppose my reason for applying for Nuffield was, firstly, it was encouragement from a West Cork farmer who had already completed a Nuffield scholarship. And it took a little bit of encouragement, I think, to get me to apply, but I'm absolutely thrilled that I did, and I don't think I would have without that. And I've put down here that was crucial for me, and I'm going to come back to that reason later on in my presentation. And it was really about personal development for me, both personally and professionally. And I can honestly say it's been a challenging 2 years, but it's been one of the best things I've ever done, and a fantastic way to spend my time. It's not easy, and I suppose I was lucky. I was able to devote the time to it, but other scholars are juggling family life and children and different jobs, running a farm, whatnot. So I suppose, it is a lot to manage, but there is huge support there. And I think if you're thinking about it at all, it's really worth considering. I wanted to expand my global network and learn about global issues and try and, I suppose, put them into context of the issues back here at home, to push myself outside of my boundaries and my comfort zones through individual travel and learning about different topics as well. And of course, then to go on a solution search for the water quality issues that we face back here in Ireland. So that brought me to my topic, why water quality, and why was that my focus area? So I think in order to get into that, it's important that we look at, the policy governing water quality at an EU level and at a national level. And ultimately, this comes from the Water Framework Directive. So the EU Water Framework Directive was established to protect water quality on all water bodies across Europe. And I suppose the target of the Water Framework Directive is that all water bodies must be at good or high status, ecological status by 2027. Now, that's not too far away. And I suppose the thoughts now are that we're not going to meet those targets. It is a big target, and within that, I suppose other policies had to be developed, and it's important that we understand the background to these as well. So within the Water Framework Directive, each member state is required to develop a river basin management plan, or the RBMP, as I suppose those working in the industry would know it as. And the purpose of that really is to map, monitor, and develop a programme of measures in order to protect water quality. And in line with the Water Framework Directive, we also have the Nitrates Directive, which I know is kind of dominating the industry at the moment as well. And the Nitrates Directive is really the main measure or the main directive within which the agricultural measures are. So it is the biggest one in which we have the liability to protect water quality from an agricultural point of view. So it was established to protect water quality from nutrient pollution sources in the agricultural industry through surface waters and groundwaters by promoting the use of good farming practices. And within the River Basin Management Plan, that's where our asset programme was developed back in 2018. And that has since been expanded, which is fantastic. So I think it's just important that you understand the various layers, that it's not just in one policy, there's multiple policies feeding into this water quality. And then, of course, within the Nitrates Directive, we have our nitrates derogation, the first of which was granted back in 2006, if I can remember correctly. And I suppose we know that the nitrates derogation is quite contentious at the moment. We are facing, I suppose, a big change this month in particular for farmers availing of the derogation. And that's about 7,000 across the island of Ireland, or the Republic. But the nitrates derogation, I suppose, was a temporary measure as such, and it always has been. And we go back on a cycle basis every 4 years to renew our nitrates derogation. And as we know, with the last renewal, we had a review which has resulted in a reduction of the maximum allowable stocking rates and nitrates levels. And really that comes back to the trends in water quality. So when the Commission grant our nitrates derogation, they are looking for the trends in water quality. And I suppose as it stood last year, the trends have not improved. So the latest stats now, I hope these are the most up-to-date ones, but I suppose 56% of water bodies in Ireland were achieving that good or high ecological status, and 44% were unsatisfactory. Now, there have been improvements, and that is important to note. Like, we have improved water quality. The ASAP programme has been very successful in turning around some of those quick turnarounds that we mentioned in catchments across the country. And I suppose that where we're seeing some issues is that our highest ecological status water bodies, some of those have dropped, while some of our good ones have increased, our highest ones have decreased. And that can become a problem because that can affect the trend. It can stabilize the trend rather than keeping it going in an upward trajectory. So it's important that we keep those trends moving in the right direction. And I suppose that led me then into my Nuffield topic and my global studies as well. So where did my journey take me for water quality? So I travelled to 8 countries across 2 years. In the first year, I travelled to the UK for my Contemporary Scholars Conference. And the Contemporary Scholars Conference is basically where all the global scholars, for my year, we actually, because we're still catching up with COVID, and unfortunately some scholars didn't get to do all of their travel during 2020 and 2021. So we had a little bit of a catch-up year in 2022. So there was over, I think, 130 scholars or 140 scholars, all brought to the Norfolk region in the UK. And it's a fantastic opportunity because you meet your peers from around the world and you're instantly building that global network, and that will help you then going forward when you are looking to develop your own topic and the countries that you want to travel to. You have all these contacts across the world, which is still kind of hard to comprehend if I'm being honest, but it's a fantastic opportunity. So first stop was the UK. I then travelled to the Netherlands, and there I suppose I was visiting some of the dairy farmers that are operating on peat soils, and trying to gain an understanding of the issues that they're facing, which are much broader than just water quality. The Netherlands is facing, I suppose, an issue with ammonia pollution and nitrate or nitrogen issues as well, and it goes beyond the agricultural sector now at this point. So it's interesting, I suppose, when we're in Ireland and we're thinking about the countries that have similar issues to us, especially in the EU. I think we look at the Netherlands naturally as one of those that are quite similar because they're very agricultural focused. But water quality was not the bigger priority. It's still a major priority, but it wasn't the priority like it is for us here in Ireland. So there we're trying to look at some of the programs that are happening on the peat soils and where dairy farmers are operating. I then travelled to Canada, and I suppose my Canadian journey kept me a little bit in the mid to east region. I was in Ontario, where I met with a number of farmers who are going against the book of how things are operated out there to try and farm more environmentally friendly. I think one of the big learnings from Canada was that the focus on sustainability and environmental protection is not what it is in Europe. They're still very much production focused, and production is the number one priority. It's not to say that sustainability isn't a priority, but it's not at the forefront. So there was a lot less programs, I suppose, to see on the ground. So really what I was trying to understand was what made those farmers, who I suppose we would call the early adopters here essentially, want to take on different measures. For example, like some farmers were trying to introduce regenerative farming in their arable production. Others were looking at soil conservation, and then some were looking at catchment focused water quality programs as well in the likes of Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. And it was really to understand why they were doing that, and why they wanted to be the ones to, I suppose, lead out on this as well. So that was super interesting. We then had a fantastic opportunity to travel to the UN FAO in Rome, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and that was really one of the highlights for me as well. And we were part of the Committee on Food Security there, and it was just really interesting to see how those policies are first negotiated and then potentially developed. Now I had to cut my trip there short, unfortunately, so I didn't get to see it out to the end, but that has become an annual opportunity for Nuffield scholars around the globe as well to be able to attend that. And I think as any individual working in agriculture, to be able to go there is a really fantastic opportunity. So then this year, my journey took me on my Global Focus Programme, and the Global Focus Programme is a mandatory part of the programme for Irish scholars. It's not for all scholars, but in Ireland it is, and I think that's fantastic. And the GFP essentially is where you select a tour that's not focused on your topic, but rather on developing your knowledge of global agriculture, and looking at the various countries within that tour and what they're doing. So it's developed by scholars for scholars. So each host country will develop the programme for those scholars visiting each year. And it ranges from everything from policy visits, you're meeting with government, you could be meeting with the minister, right down to meeting the farmers on the ground and gaining an understanding of the problems and the issues faced in those countries. So back in March 2023, I travelled to New Zealand for 3 weeks. Part of that was my individual travel, looking at the water quality measures, which I'll touch on, and part of that was on my GFP as well. And the GFP is open to all the scholars in the participating year, but we were really lucky this year, or last year, that the Nuffield Triennial Conference was being hosted in New Zealand. So that was actually part of our GFP, which is fantastic. The Triennial Conference is open to all alumni from the various years, and it's essentially hosted in a different country every 3 years. And it's what I would call a moving tour of agricultural tour of the country. And we're fortunate to be hosting that in Ireland in 2026. So if you become a scholar before 2026, you'll have the opportunity to join the Nuffield Triennial then, which we're very excited about. I then travelled to Australia, and our journey in Australia took us around northern Queensland and the tropics region, and we got to visit banana farmers, papaya farmers, coffee farmers. It was really, really interesting. Thankfully, we didn't see any snakes or alligators, but there was plenty of kangaroos and whatnot. So, yeah, we got to see a part of Australia I probably would not have travelled to myself if I was thinking about going there. And then I also did some individual travel there myself as well. The GFP took me to Japan. We spent 10 days in Japan, and a lot of that was spent in Hokkaido, which I really didn't know what to expect from Japanese agriculture, but it was fantastic to see the variety. We got on some grass-based dairy farms, we got to see Wagyu beef farms, green onion farms, the horticultural sector, and it was really phenomenal to see that. And then we had 4 days in Indonesia as well. And again, it was just, you don't know what to expect from any of this, but it was fantastic to see the local farmers alongside the big beef farmers, and to see how there was a 20,000 cattle beef feedlot that we visited, and how they're supporting the local farmers by giving them cows to raise themselves, and then they sell them back to the beef farm and they're sold to market. So it was just super interesting. We got an overview of all sides of agriculture, both from the well-developed countries to the lesser so. So that's just a snapshot of my journey, but other journeys took people to much different countries as well. So this is just some of the photos, I suppose, from my journey around the world. The first being the Nuffield Scholars from Ireland from 2021 and 2022, when we visited the UK on our CSC. Some potato farmers in Prince Edward Island from Canada in the summer of 2021. Our Global Focus programme in New Zealand reunited many of us from our CSC. And I got to meet the Minister of Agriculture for New Zealand as well, which was a highlight for me too. And I suppose, you know, the biggest part of the Nuffield journey is the people you meet. It's not necessarily the knowledge, although the knowledge is super important. It's those connections and the people that give the time to you and tell you their story. You know, that's super valuable. And I suppose if we can return that for scholars in the future coming to Ireland, it'd be a privilege to do so. But the first picture here is the Taranaki catchments group and some of the farmers that I met with there that are working on water quality, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about that. And some of the friends that I've made along the way as well. And the last photo here is some of the Indonesian men who were working in a palm oil factory and insisted that we took their photo on the day. So yeah, we got to meet some fantastic people along the journey. So what did I learn on water quality, and I suppose what can Ireland take from that as well? So the Taranaki catchments community are based in the North Island of New Zealand on the west coast, just beside Mount Taranaki, which if anyone gets the opportunity to visit there, if you've already visited there, you'll know how beautiful it is. And the reason this project stood out to me, I suppose, was it was super similar to home. You know, what they were doing, I could see happening back here straight away. It's not too unlike the ASAP program. It is a catchments community. It's catchments focused water quality program. But I think the key difference between this program and the ASAP program was that it was 100% farmer led and farmer driven. So the farmers took the ownership of this project. And I suppose they were supported by the Ministry of Primary Industries, which covers agriculture, and the local authorities. But the funding that they were given was not huge. They had very little funds really. So what they did was they negotiated good rates on materials with suppliers that they could buy the likes of fencing posts at cost, or whatever else they might need. And they got together initially as a small group of farmers. It has grown and they've split themselves into smaller catchments now, which is fantastic. But they just got together and said, we have a problem. This problem's going nowhere and we need to do something about it. who wants to get on board and who wants to start something. So that's kind of how it started, which is brilliant, I think. So there's 15 catchment groups at the moment across Teagasc. So it started from one and has broadened out to 15, which is fantastic. It's community focused. So again, ASSOP is community focused as well. And I think, you'll see there's a lot of similarities between these, but the difference, I suppose, what I thought was quite nice was there's an opportunity for members of the community to volunteer in the catchments programme. So 6,000 hours are volunteered every year through the programme. And you might be wondering how this is done. So, for example, if a farmer needs to fence off all his water courses and he doesn't have the labour to do it, or there's something going on, he can check, is there anybody in the community that's willing to give him a hand for, it might be 2 hours, it might be 2 days, whatever it might be, whatever they can give, they'll do it. So there's 6,000 hours of volunteer work done from the community to support the farmers to put in positive actions that will ultimately benefit the entire community. And then they hold their regular community meetings as well. And what I learned, I suppose, when I was there was the community meetings aren't always just a meeting in a town hall. Sometimes they might go to bingo, or they might go for dinner and drinks and have a chat. But it's about that connection and sharing that information and building the knowledge and sharing it between each other, so that the locals know why the farmers are doing what they're doing and the farmers understand what the locals' concerns are. And I think that's really, really important. And I know that's what we're trying to do here in Ireland as well. But I suppose there's always some nuggets that we can learn from other countries. As I said, they don't get much funding, so instead they're trying to minimise the overheads. So they've got agreements with local suppliers and vendors to try and, I suppose, procure any materials they might need at a cost price and minimise their costs where possible. Now, the local authorities do pitch in if they can, and they support the programme by providing advisory services and extension services free of charge. So an ecologist can come out to the group and I suppose share some information with the group as much as possible. And stakeholder engagement is crucial as well. As we know from any programme that we try to roll out in agriculture, the stakeholder engagement is really, really important. So I suppose the stakeholders are everyone from government down to the local community, authorities and the industry as well. And Fonterra, I suppose, would be the biggest industry stakeholder there, and they're supporting the farmers as best they can as well, again, through minimising overheads where possible. So just to take a look, I suppose that these are some of the photos from my couple of days around Taranaki. And it's impossible to tell, but that second picture is actually a reed bed system on the farm of Donna Cram. So Donna is, I suppose, the lead of the whole project. She's one of the founders of the Taranaki catchments community, and she works in the local authority as well, but she's a huge advocate for farmers. So Donna was one of the pilot projects to put in a reed bed water treatment system essentially on her farm. Donna's farming just over 300 cows with her husband, and her daughter gives a hand at times as well. And it's a spring calving grass-based dairy farm, no different than home really. I think the only difference was they have blue skies and a nice mountain to look at out the back, but otherwise you could have thought you were on a farm in Ireland. And the double benefit of Donna's reed bed system is the habitat it's providing for biodiversity. So she said that the bird population around this has really increased as well. The local authorities are involved in this pilot project because obviously, as we know in Ireland, to have a reed bed system on a farm, it requires an EPA discharge licence. That's not the case in New Zealand. It is a little bit easier to put in a reed bed system over there, but it's still a major concern. So what they did was they partnered with the local authority who monitor the water quality. So you can't actually see it there, but to the right-hand side of the picture, there's a little water monitoring station where they come and take samples from the reed bed system just before it discharges back into the river to test it every few weeks to make sure that what's coming out is of optimal water quality levels as well. But I think, there's a lot to learn here. I think if we can build the trust that farmers would manage a reed bed system like this appropriately, it might help in trying to get around those licensing requirements, because I do think they can play a huge role in treating the likes of grey water runoff from roadways and from yards as well. I don't see them as an alternative to storing our soiled water or things like that. We're still going to need our soiled water tanks. But a lot of the issues that I would have seen over the years of walking farms were from the likes of roadways, underpasses, and runoff from yards as well. And I think reed systems could really play a huge role in that. And they have the double benefit of biodiversity, but it is crucial that they're managed appropriately. And the one thing is we can't get lazy with managing that as well. So I thought that was a really interesting learning from the Taranaki group. And also just to stress that if anybody is interested in learning more on the Taranaki catchments, or if you're planning to travel to New Zealand and you'd like to meet with them, they're more than happy to receive guests and visitors and share their learnings. And equally, they hope to come to Ireland and do the same over the next couple of years as well. The third picture here is a different farm, and this was one of Donna's neighbours, and his focus was more on riparian margins. And again, unfortunately, the photo cropped on me ever so slightly, but where you see those hedgerows and trees, they're all riparian margins, and some of them are 30, 40 metres wide, some of them are 10 metres wide. But it was just driving through the farm, driving through the fields, it was just so nice to see so much biodiversity and so much hedgerows, and to know that it's doing the double job of protecting and enhancing water quality is even better. So I asked this farmer, you know, what made you want to do this, I suppose, initially, and what was the barrier that you faced? And he said that the first thing that made him want to do it was that Donna told him he had to, so that's always a good thing. She's an encouraging farmer, and made him get involved. But the second was he knew he wanted to leave things in a better state for the future generation on his farm. The biggest barrier for him was not so much what people would say, but what he thought people would say about letting things go, or maybe not keeping things as neat and tidy as they used to be, or not utilising the land as much as he could. So he cut back his cow numbers ever so slightly, expanded his riparian zones, planted trees, planted hedgerows, and it really, like, it just looked phenomenal. Now it is a very hilly farm, so his riparian zones have a huge role to play in terms of preventing overland flow runoff and reducing the nutrients going into the rivers. And the last picture is from his farm as well. And this is one of the riparian zones that's actually more of a habitat now. And I suppose it was really nice to see. So he was telling me that there's a small field essentially in this, and you could probably put an animal or two in here if you really wanted to, but he decided to fence it off, and they call it the camping ground. So every summer he takes his kids down, they set up a tent, and they have a little barbecue down by the river. And it was just really nice to see that, you know, they're getting, I suppose, some personal joy from what he's doing on his farm as well. So that's just a quick snippet of the different actions in the Taranaki community. But again, it's probably the one that I found was the most similar to Ireland. And just, you know, the difference being it was farmer-led. The farmers took the lead on this. They saw the issues were coming. They said, well, you know, nobody's going to fix it unless we try, so we have to take ownership in this. So I didn't realize I put that in twice. Apologies. So then I suppose the other project I'm going to discuss was in Australia. And this project was one I didn't expect to find a potential solution for water quality back in Ireland. So while we were in Cairns in Australia, we visited a number of banana farmers, and a lot of these farmers are working as part of the Queensland Reef Water Quality Programme. So Farming in the Reef is a programme that was developed in order to reduce the number of nutrients that were ending up in the sea and having a negative impact on the Great Barrier Reef. And I'm sure most of us know, the Great Barrier Reef is a huge tourist attraction. So there's a lot of eyes on it at all times, which means there's a lot of eyes on what the potential cause of pollution of the reef is, meaning the farmers. So the number one user of nitrogen in that area are banana farmers. So the Farming in the Reef programme was developed to reduce the nutrient pollutants and pesticide runoffs to the Great Barrier Reef. And again, similar to ASIP, it's an extension programme by the Queensland Government and the Ministry of Agriculture in conjunction with the Reef Protection Agency. And together they train specialist advisors and mentors to enable farmers to take actions for water quality. So very, very similar to the advisors in ASSOP. I think what was really interesting to me here was understanding the amount of nutrients that are used by banana farmers to grow the crop, and I suppose the work that goes into it. So over 400 kilos of nitrogen per hectare are used to grow a crop of bananas, which I thought was just crazy. Like we're using half that or a little over half that here in Ireland to grow grass. So it just seemed crazy that was the figure. And again, it's very free draining soils. They get a lot of rain. It's a subtropic region, so they get seasonal rain, and it can be really heavy downpours. So there was a lot of groundwater pollution, and then in the areas closer to the coast, a lot of overland flow runoff, where that sandy, loamy soil was taken with it as well. So a lot of nutrients getting into the water. The aim for the programme is to reduce this back to 150 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. And they're doing that through precision agriculture and improved nutrient efficiency. So like here we use our nutrient management planning program, and I know there's going to be a webinar on that next week. But I suppose they're using similar software and technology to try and reduce the reliance on synthetic fertilizer. One of the other things they were doing was they started bagging bananas. And by bagging the bananas, they were basically able to tag their growth rates and tailor the amount of nitrogen that was needed per tree, essentially to ensure that they were getting the right crop for the right fertilizer and reducing their reliance on the number of inputs they're using. This was quite a big project, and it's funded, I think, until the end of next year. But they received almost 290 million Australian dollars in government funding. And again, the big reason for that fund is because of the eyes on the Great Barrier Reef. It's a huge tourist attraction. The local communities, all of their business revolve around this. Like there's boat tours going out of the cities from Cairns and the surrounding towns daily. And it's a huge revenue income for them. So if they have to reduce the tours that they're doing out to the reef, that's going to reduce the local economy, essentially. So the government saw that they needed to step in here and to work with the farmers in order to reduce the nutrient pollution that was happening in the reef. The other thing to stress here is that the banana production in Australia is for 100% for home consumption, so they don't export any of their produce. The only place it's exported to is the likes of Melbourne, so it's all for home consumption. They grow all of their own fruit, and they don't import any bananas either. So, it's still a very important crop in the country, so they had to do something, I suppose, to try and keep the production levels up, but reduce the reliance on synthetic fertilizers. So this just gives you a feel of two different banana farms. They all look the same when you're out there, but I suppose this was after a deluge. We were absolutely drenched going home from here. You can't tell, but that is a white Toyota pickup truck, but that's the type of soil that they're dealing with. It's that kind of red earth, loamy, sandy kind of soil, and I suppose it mobilizes nitrogen quite easily. So that was just to give an idea of, I suppose, what they're facing all of the time out there, and trying to manage the nutrient load and the runoff from that. You can see there in the second picture with Car, the bags on the bananas, so they're geotagged and weighed to monitor the growth rates of the crop. And the one thing on these farms that I didn't see, there was a lot less, I suppose, other actions in terms of trying to put in the likes of riparian zones near streams or things like that to minimize runoff. That's not been done as much in this particular area just yet, but it is something that they're looking into. So what were the conclusions that I came to from these particular projects? So you can see the nice view of Mount Taranaki there on the right hand side. The one thing I think is that no matter where you are in the world, we're all facing similar challenges when it comes to agriculture, sustainability, environmental management. The challenges are no different. We might have different priorities within those challenges, but our approach, I think our approach is the same in many of the countries. There's still things we can learn from each other, I think it really is important to stress that what we're doing back home it's really positive, and it is world class. I mean, the ASAP program was one of the first of its kind in Europe, and other than the Taranaki catchments program and now the Banana project, I haven't seen too much that's similar to the ASAP program. And, you know, I think maybe we don't always appreciate the work that goes into that program behind the scenes from the various different bodies that are involved, be it Teagasc, the dairy industry, even the facilitators training. You know, there's a lot that goes into programs like ASAP and the Signpost program as well. And we really have to appreciate that and, you know, try and avail of it as best we can as well. Farmers have the ability to lead the change in water quality together. So I think, you know, coming back to my first point of why did I apply for a Nuffield scholarship, it was because a farmer encouraged me to. And that encouragement, without it, I wouldn't have done this. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be learned from that, because farmers can encourage each other to do better, to do more, to start up a project. And, you know, you won't know if it'll work until you try. And I think, you know, coming back to that, you know, encouraging each other to get involved in different programs that are already out there, or if you think there's something that you want to develop locally and it might just be a thought right now in your head, you know, talk to someone and see if someone else wants to get involved, and just see, is there something in that, because you've nothing to lose by trying something. Taking ownership of the problem can lead to better engagement and more uptake of results. So look, we all know we're facing kind of uncharted territory with our nitrates derogation over the next couple of years. And I think we just have to take ownership of the problem right now. It's easy to look for an easier way out, or to blame someone, and look, you know, there probably are people to blame, but what good is that going to do? We have to take ownership and look at what we can do ourselves on the ground. You know, I say it regularly, and I know the West Cork farmers were probably sick of me saying it too, but when you're looking at the problem, I'm not a farmer, I'm not managing land, I'm not managing nutrients. I can't do anything for water quality in that regard. I can make sure that, you know, what I'm doing at home for sustainability is the most that I can do. But unfortunately, I can't do anything in an agricultural context in terms of land management. But you can. And you really have to ask yourself, are you doing the most that you can? You know, taking part in the ASAP program is the first step, but actually implementing the actions is the second step. And I know a lot of farmers have, and that's fantastic, but we really need to ramp this up. The big thing with changing water quality is the lag times that it takes for us to see the benefits of the change that we make. So the sooner we make the change, the quicker we'll see the benefits. And we can't be waiting for policy to change or for money to come in or whatever it might be. A lot of the actions that we can do, especially in nitrates, are cost effective, and they've got double benefits for biodiversity. And it's really just putting that priority at the top of your list and not letting it slip. Is one of the key things that I think we need to do going forward. So taking ownership and asking yourself and being honest with yourself, am I doing the most that I can do? What else can I do? And sometimes it's not easy to be that honest with ourselves, not just when it comes to this, but just in life in general. And it is something that you have to grapple with. But I think, you know, if you can do that much, it's going to have a huge benefit going forward. And coming back to Taranaki, when I was very fortunate to join the group for dinner one evening, and I kind of said to them all, I was like, why did you all decide to do this, you know, collectively, and why are you driving it and expanding it? And one of the farmers said to me, 10 farmers taking one action is better than one farmer taking 10 actions. And that really resonated with me. And I remembered it from a catchment that we had down in Cork, and all the farmers got on board. And, you know, the minute that we saw more and more farmers joining and just taking one action to start with, one action isn't always enough, but one is a start. You know, we saw huge benefits, and it was really exciting to see that. So if you take anything from that today, it's that 10 farmers taking one action is better than one farmer taking 10 actions, and building from that and encouraging each other. So my recommendations out of my Nuffield studies, I suppose, were to establish water quality focused discussion groups on a catchment basis where the farmers take the lead. Now, we're all used to discussion groups, we're all used to KT programs or dairy discussion groups, beef discussion groups, grass discussion groups, whatever it might be. But do we have one that's just water quality? And what I mean by that is maybe it's a group that you're already part of, and you take one meeting a quarter and say, okay, today we're going to discuss what we're doing for water quality. Because until you start discussing it among yourselves, there's not going to be much change made. Because if 6 out of a group of 8 people say they're doing something for water quality and the other 2 stay quiet, it might encourage them then to say, okay, I'm going to put this on the top of my priority list. You need to keep communicating to each other, be open about the actions that you're taking, and to encourage adoption of different practices, whether that be reducing fertilizer on one field to start with and seeing how much you grow compared to the other, and telling your neighbour this is what you did and it saved you a few bob, or whatever it might be. Talking, communicating, sharing that information, that is crucial. And that's what Nuffield is all about as well. The further funding for ASIP, thankfully, has already been there, and it got there before I did, which is fantastic. But expanding ASIP and the agricultural catchments programme is crucial. And I think finding more permanent funding mechanisms for these needs to be considered within the context of the EU as well. It's great that we have funding at the moment and for the next number of years, but there needs to be a more permanent source of funding for those going forward, because those extension services are going to be crucial over the next number of years. And finally, I want to thank the Nuffield Ireland Scholarship investors. We're really, really, really fortunate in Ireland to have these investors on board. And when you see those names listed there, they're major players in the industry. They believe in the message of Nuffield and they believe in the scholars. And it's fantastic to see that support for the programme, and to be able to give back, I suppose, to the industry in the way that we do. And so a huge thank you to all of the investors. It's really, really appreciated, not just by myself, but by all the scholars and, of course, by the board of Nuffield as well. And we look forward to seeing what the new crop of scholars have to offer over the next 12 months as well. So that's it for me. If you do wish to contact me, please don't hesitate, and I look forward to some questions.
That was, you packed a lot in there in a relatively short time, so appreciate that. And it gives us a good background as well on the scholarship program itself. Saying about 10 farmers taking one action as opposed to one farmer taking 10 actions. It really says it all, doesn't it? It does. A fantastic quote that I suspect we'll hear again after today.
Hope so.
Yes. So, thanks, Aoife. We have some good questions coming in there, so do keep your questions coming through to us. But maybe there's a statement more than a question coming through from one farmer. I presume, yes, it is a farmer, and I'm going to read it out because I think it's very. I suppose it reflects the views I know of many farmers out there in Ireland. So I'm just going to read through this. It's a little bit long, but and look, you don't have to respond to it, Aoife. But it's I think it's a fair statement. It says, "I'm a dairy farmer doing my best. I find it very frustrating that enforcement of the rules is very poor. There is no point in bringing in new rules and restrictions when they are not enforced. Every year, including this one, I see slurry being spread in the closed period, and that's only what is visible. A huge number of farms do not handle soiled water or yard runoff correctly. There are also rules that do not apply to non-derogation farmers that should apply to everyone. One example is that, as far as I know, they can still allow their animals drink directly from rivers. Simple, easy wins that are ignored, while derogation farmers are taking all the blame." So I suppose the sentiment there is that, look, particularly with water quality, all it takes is one offender, if you want to call it that, for slurry or nutrients to get into the wrong place, and that can actually have a huge impact on a water body. So I think yes, frustration there amongst farmers to see other farmers where 99% of farmers are doing their utmost to improve water quality. And I suppose that came through from the catchments or that community approach where and that communication between different farmers about everybody trying to move forward. Was that the sense you got from that group there in Taranaki?
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely understand the frustration of that farmer. I know it from my previous role, working on the ASAP program. It is very frustrating when you're doing all you can do, and you as a group are still getting the blame for the problems. I think what maybe we need to do a little less of here in Ireland is we keep talking about the derogation. And it's derogation, derogation, derogation. We have to remember there's 7,000 farmers in derogation, and there's 137,000 farmers across the country. And his point of the rules should apply to everyone, and the rules that apply to farmers outside of derogation is very valid. And we don't talk about that enough. That's why I think we need to talk about water quality as it is, and maybe lose the focus on derogation. Derogation is super important, and it's a huge piece of policy that's really important to the dairy industry. But actually, the derogation farmers are probably the early adopters, an awful lot of them. I would have worked with a lot of farmers in derogation who were the ones that maybe signed up to ASAP first and foremost. So I think sometimes the message can get lost because we get too caught up in the policy side of things and the political side of things of trying to retain things. We need to simplify it, and bring it back down to those farmers taking action and asking yourself, well, am I doing all I can do? I used to say to farmers, try not to worry about what your neighbour's doing. Focus on what you can do. And if there are gaps in you being able to follow the rules 100%, then you need to address them. I agree that the enforcement has not been at optimal levels, I suppose, over the last number of years. I don't really know what the plans are for that at the moment, but we can't wait for someone to come in and do an inspection either. Like, you either want to retain your derogation and do what you can for water quality and abide by the rules, or then, in my opinion, and this could be very controversial, but I would say you don't have the right to be given out about it as a farmer. Or to, we see the protests in Germany and in France and whatnot happening over the last number of months. If that was ever to happen here, I would be saying to farmers, well, have you done all you can to ensure that we hold on to this piece of legislation that's so important? And are you doing what you can do for water quality and biodiversity? And that was really what came from Taranaki as well. They decided, okay, well, rather than giving out about what's happening, we need to do something and we need to take action. And again, there's a lot of caveats that affect that, be it monetary or whatever, even mental health, physical health. There's a lot being thrown at farmers at the moment. So that's why this whole project was about bringing water quality as the priority on your to-do list. And you need to figure out what your priorities are and try and bring that up the list as best you can.
Okay. Pat, we have some really good questions. We have about 5 minutes left for questions. So, Aoife, if we could maybe try and get through those questions, and I think people would appreciate your insights.
Yeah, there's a number of comments, I think, more so than questions. A comment from somebody I think who's involved in a county council. Farmers need to speak up when they see bad practice. We do need more enforcement, and it is improving, but we cannot have an enforcement officer at every crossroads. Bad practice by a small number of individual impact on all, and it needs to be called out. And I suppose that the issue there is trying to get farmers to take responsibility a bit for trying to encourage others to improve practice.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's where your discussion groups are really important as well, and sharing that knowledge. I mean, it's very hard to call out someone for doing bad, but maybe trying to encourage them to do good is another way of working around that.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a general issue I think that we probably need to realize, and it's reflected in a question here, and that is that every farmer, by nature of farming, we're having an impact on water quality. You can't farm and not have an impact. But I think it's the responsibility then of all farmers to try and look at the impact they're having and trying to minimize it. The farmers saying they're not having an impact, that's just impossible. Absolutely,
100%. And the other thing that I kind of drove home with that was a lot of farmers saying, well, I've signed up to the ASAP program. That's step one. But you got to follow through with step 2, step 3. and move forward with that. Signing up isn't enough.
A specific question in relation to the reed beds and the reed bed systems in Taranaki, and you said that there was measurement going on versus the grey water that had previously been going in. Was there the observable reductions in nutrient coming out of those reed beds? And I suppose a question, what sizes were those reed beds? Because in some cases where you're looking at the licensed reed beds, you're talking about very, very large reed bed installations.
Yeah, so I don't have the specific figures on it, but I can get them. Donna would have no problem sharing them. In terms of the measurement, what they did was they measured the clarity, so the reduction in sediment within the water, the nitrate and the phosphate. Now I can't remember the phosphate off the top of my head, but I know that the nitrate target is the same as Ireland. So in order for this to be successful, what was coming out of the water had to be less than 2.4 milligrams per litre in terms of nitrates. Otherwise, it was going to be shut down. So it was that simple in order for it to be effective. In terms of the size of the reed bed, again, it's the same there. The reed bed system has to be large enough to handle what's coming into it. So the way they did it was they actually put in a small reed bed to only handle, I think it was runoff from maybe 3 to 4 roadways on that particular farm. So it wasn't taking everything from the whole farm, because otherwise it wouldn't have worked because the farm was too big anyway. So this, again, it was a test system. They've put one in on this farm, and they put a second one in, was just being put in while I was there on another farm about 6 kilometers away. But yeah, it's, I think you have to look at what you have in terms of space available to give to something like that, and realize it's not going to be your silver bullet for taking all of your grey water, but it might be an action that can help. But they're also expensive to put in, they're expensive to establish, and they are high maintenance. So if you don't think you're going to be able to maintain that, don't even dream of looking at it. You're going to have to look at something that's going to be a lot more effective, which could be in the form of concrete, unfortunately. But yeah, there's a lot to consider when it comes to them. But I do think they are fantastic if you're in the position to be able to put one in and look after it. But you can always look at it from the point of view that it's not going to take everything from the yard or from the roadways, but it might take a section.
Okay.
And work with that.
There's a question here. In Ireland, the approach is often encouraging change by associating them with established habits. For example, the graduated introduction of less across farms and the widening of existing closed period over the years. Has it been your experience in other countries, and do you think that this is an effective way of, I suppose, gradually introducing practice and regulation?
So I'm not sure if I really came across that on my travels, but again, I probably didn't spend enough time in places or have it in the back of my head to know that, if that makes sense. But I do think that it is an effective way of introducing new measures. And I know that from my own personal life of health and fitness, and creating habits is always the best way to try and move forward in a positive way. So, when you create good habits in that regard, of course, it's going to have a positive impact in anything you do in life. And I think sometimes the problem we have with that, like the less introduction was absolutely necessary, but it did take a long time. And you have to be in the right mindset. Mindset's really important here as well. I think, we have to remember that as well, in terms of prioritizing water quality, in terms of prioritizing sustainability. Mindset of the farmer is super important. So starting those habits, you have to be in a good mindset as well to be able to continue them through. But I definitely think that is something that should be looked at 100%.
Okay. And a question in relation to Taranaki again, and I'll summarize it, is basically asking the question, was it just the reed beds they looked at, or did that broaden out into a broader suite of more targeted issues where there were specific problems on specific farms?
Oh, no, the rebed was just one of the really interesting ones that I found that we're not doing here in Ireland as broadly, I suppose. No, it's very similar to ASSOP. They call them their critical source areas as well. So they're looking at farm by farm approach, and they've used the LiDAR technology, and they're looking at the runoff. Like, it is a very, very hilly catchment. So they've got a mixture of groundwater and overland flow issues. They're looking at nitrogen reduction, phosphate reduction, in terms of synthetic fertilizer. They're looking at multi-species swards. The biggest one was probably the riparian zones. That's probably the one action they drove home across the catchment, was trying to encourage the riparian zones on the lower lands where there was a lot of overland flow. And the reason for that was the double benefit for biodiversity, which is also an issue in New Zealand, across the world, really. So no, it wasn't just that one measure. There's a suite of measures, and the website does go through some of those as well. But again, no different to ASIP, but I think it's important that, not all the actions they take will benefit Ireland either. Majority will, because it's a grass-based system. But looking at our local actions is really important as well, and what works natively as well. But yeah, it's farm specific.
We are gone a little over time this morning, but really, really interesting topic, Aoife, and we had almost 400 people joining us this morning. Just shows you how hot a topic it is, and we even actually have somebody from New Zealand joining us.
Oh, excellent! So
a late night visit from New Zealand. So it's nice to see that interest in the project is there. Aoife, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
No problem.
Pat, thanks for helping with questions. And just before we let you go, I want to share details about a new sustainability awards program that Teagasc has launched this week. This is a new awards program for farmers across Ireland, with a €30,000 prize fund, and the closing date for that is the end of February. So do look at the Teagasc website for more information on that. Full details and application forms are available on the Teagasc website. And a reminder that next week we're going to be joined by Dr. Pádraig Foley from Teagasc, who's going to be talking about the Teagasc Nutrient Management Planning online system and how that's helping farmers to embrace change on the ground. And I think it's fair to say that Teagasc is leading the way in terms of nutrient management planning tools for better management at a farm level. So once again, thanks everybody, and Happy New Year to everybody, if it's not too late to say that. And we'll see you all again next week at 9:30. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost Series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.